guess we'll get started. We got quorum. The Planning and Zoning meeting for July 19th, 2017 will now come to order. Please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It was right behind me. I didn't see it.
Can we have roll call, please?
Chairman Williams,
Here.
Vice Chairman Shavir,
Here.
Secretary Chambers,
Here.
Dr. Faison, Member Baker,
Here.
Member Ritchie, Member Bobick, and School Board Member Hare.
Here.
And we have quorum. Next is approval of minutes for July 5th, 2017.
May I make a motion that we approve the minutes from, was that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must first fill out the oath card heard on the agenda item and sign the oath card contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance, somewhere over there, or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on an item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side for or against may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents you desire the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. And in this, I think these are just two, but as both items have been properly advertised,
Yes.
and has anybody spoke to the public about the two items coming before us? Okay, so we're good, and if we can go to the first item, please.
The first item before you tonight is a draft ordinance to allow chickens in the backyard. It's titled Backyard Chickens. This issue was brought before the City Council at meetings dated April 11th and April 25th. Several residents of the city requested that the City Council consider an ordinance to allow chickens in the backyard. Currently, they are prohibited throughout the city. There was an ordinance that was considered several years ago, but was denied. At that time, it considered allowing chickens in certain residential zoning districts as a pilot program. And as I said before, that was denied, so now we have new residents that have been asking for this to be resurrected. We did put in some information here in your agenda that gives you some background about how other cities handle the approval of backyard chickens, such as the city of Cocoa, the city of Melbourne, and we also put in some information that was provided to us by the University of Florida IFAS program. So just to give you some information here, Melbourne has been allowing backyard chickens for 20 years or more, and they have only they've only revoked the 10 permits in that time period, from what our understanding is. They do have a code enforcement annual inspection, and they have a permit that you're required to get every 2 years. We're not proposing that in our draft ordinance before you tonight. Ours is a little more loose than the last time that was submitted to you. It allows backyard chickens, up to 4 chickens, no roosters, in the backyard with certain standards is where they can be located on any single-family residential lot. The city of Cocoa has a relatively new program. They've only had one applicant, according to them, and that they do require their applicants to attend a class at the University of Florida IFAS. So I'll give you some description here of the ordinance. We're proposing to amend Chapter 5 of the Code of Ordinances, specifically Section 5-86, with a new subparagraph 5, and that starts on page 12 of your packet. The underlined text is the proposed new text of the ordinance that will be included in the Code of Ordinances. So, again, we're suggesting that Backyard chickens can be permitted on any lots or parcels occupied by a single-family detached residential home. The term backyard chicken will refer to chickens, hens or female chickens only, not roosters or male chickens, or as we stated here, geese, turkeys, peafowl, and ducks, or any other kind of fowl. So specifically just one type of animal here. No more than 4 on any lot. They may be kept for personal use. They cannot be used to sell or to slaughter or to use as any kind of agricultural use, for business rather. Eggs can't be raised in order to sell eggs to others for any kind of commercial use. So they're really only specifically for a personal use. All stored feed must be kept in a pest-proof container or be kept inside a secured structure. Chicken coops and enclosures must be maintained in a clean and sanitary condition at all time, including dry bedding. Activities permitted by this section must be conducted in a manner that does not create a public nuisance, odor, noise, or attraction of pests. Chickens must be kept within a coop or enclosure and may not be released or set free to roam unless such roaming is confined to the fenced rear yard of the adjacent property. Chicken coops and enclosures must be screened from neighboring properties with either an opaque fence and/or landscaping. And chicken coops and enclosures shall be located in the rear yard only. No chicken coop or enclosure should be closer than 10 feet from any rear or side property line, and they must meet the side corner setbacks for a principal structure. That is the chicken ordinance that we are proposing to you at the direction of the City Council, and we'll take any questions you have, including recommendations as for any changes.
When I went through this, I really liked the Rockledge, and it looks like you guys mirrored Rockledge's quite a bit. You know, what I've seen in the past, I really thought that this went through for at least 1 year. I was a bit shocked when you told me that it didn't go through, and I thought we were going to do the 1 year, and then 3 councilmen decided that it wasn't. And I guess the reason why I thought that was because it kept on coming up and coming up. And generally when items like that happen, it means that they're okay, they just want to get the language right. And then when they went to the final vote, they declined. You know, my personal take is, I mean, this is similar. I think this is only 2013. There was a lot of you guys on this board before. I don't think we had a huge issue. Maybe we might. But this is a good time to air your grievances if you don't like this, because council is, I mean, it's going to them. So, is there anything, questions of staff before we open up to the public?
I have a couple questions. Are you saying that you're going to be allowing these on these really small lots that are like 0.1 acres on these homes that, I mean, is that what you're saying?
As it's currently written, yes.
So there's not going to be any minimum requirement. What about asking neighbors on either side if they approve?
That's both suggestions we can include in the ordinance if that's,
See, I mean,
you would request
I
that.
could see where a couple neighbors would be very reticent about having chickens next door. They can be smelly, they can be loud, I understand why people want the fresh eggs and everything, but I do have some reservations about the chickens. I mean, what's it gonna be next? Goats, pigs, geese, ducks, it's just, I think you should have a minimum size lot requirement. I would think at least a ½ an acre. I even think it should be in the rural residential district. And I think the neighbors on either side should be asked their permission to, if they have any objection to the chickens. That's my personal opinion.
Is anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with the comments just made, because I had those same concerns. And I do think that we should be using a half acre for the basic standard if you're going to do that. I mean, personally speaking, I live just off of Park Avenue in Knox McRae, so the lots are fairly small, 100 by 70, somewhere in that range. And personally speaking, I don't think I would like to have a chicken coop on somebody's property backed up to my property. I don't find that appealing at all. So, and the other thing that I find is enforcement. Who's going to do the enforcing? Who's going to follow through on whether the chicken coops are cleaned? How is someone going to have access to the property to enforce that? Or is that just something automatically built in when you apply for a permit, that you automatically sign off that you can have an inspection?
I can answer this.
Okay, go ahead, yeah.
As far as the code enforcement, we would respond to any complaints from neighbors if one arose, but there's no permit that's required under this ordinance, and so it's not a permit that would be revoked. However, if a property owner has chickens in their yard that's not being maintained, and code enforcement was called out to inspect the property, if they find chickens in the front yard, or if they find any violation of this ordinance, then the property would be cited with this ordinance, and the owner would be responsible to call code enforcement for an inspection to prove that they are in compliance and that it is being maintained in order to close that case.
And if they were not so inclined to call for an inspection, in other words, that responsibility is put on the owner, the homeowner.
Once there's a notice of a violation, a potential violation could be created by a neighbor, and the code enforcement department would need to inspect and verify whether or not there is a complaint that's unfounded or if there is a complaint that needs to be pursued. So that's how code enforcement would enforce this ordinance, and I think that there's a good enforcement mechanism here that avoids the permitting scheme where the homeowner is allowed to have the animals by right rather than going through that permitting process, which may add an extra layer of bureaucracy that may not be necessary when code enforcement does have that ability to enforce our code.
And then what would be the penalty for a homeowner in violation?
If a homeowner does not come into compliance before the time stated in the original notice of violation that would get issued, then the case would go before the code enforcement board, and the board would then decide how much of a fine to assess against the property, up to $250 per day.
Okay.
Brevard County already has rules set up for that type of occupation. Well, why don't we just use their rules? The counties already have the same rules that we've been talking about.
Are you referring to the packet that we gave to you on page 18?
18. Mhm.
Okay, so specifically, what is it that you're referring to?
Rather than us making up, the city making up their own rules for having chickens, when the county has already got.
We would still have to, right now, the county's ordinance is specific to the unincorporated area of the county, so it would not apply to
I
the
know,
city.
but they still have their rules is the same thing we would probably use anyway.
We would have to adopt an ordinance,
Yeah.
either by reference to their code or just adopt those standards into our ordinance.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
We could do that.
Yeah.
If that's the discretion of the P and Z, that's your recommendation, we could certainly do that.
I think the Brevard County list is limited. There's a couple other things that I thought should be mentioned. I mean, there's, like under Rockledge, odors cannot be detectable at property boundaries. I think that's important. Some of them require a class be taken, the 2-hour agricultural class. I think that's a good recommendation because, I mean, I think people that don't know what, haven't had chickens before, they should have the little bit of knowledge to be able to handle this. And some of these are requiring a maximum of 25 permits. I think that might be a good idea. I think these are all good ideas.
I'm sorry, the maximum of,
Quantity, 20.
There's several of these areas here that are
Under Rockledge?
limiting. No, it's not under Rockledge.
Okay.
I got some of these highlighted
Orlando's
here.
50.
Bonita Springs, cap 25 permits.
Okay.
Keep in mind, this information was published in 2013 from this report.
But I think the permit should be limited. I don't think we should have, Also, what if you have a neighborhood where you've got quite a few people that want the chickens? The more chickens you have, the more likely you are to have the noise and the smell and whatever. I think that needs to be addressed. I think these are all important points that need to be considered when writing up the ordinance.
So, Member Ritchie, I'm hearing that you're suggesting a maximum number of homes would be allowed to have these throughout the city?
Especially in individual neighborhoods. I mean,
Okay.
This is saying 25 in the county, or in the city, that might be a little shy, but I think, like I said, what if you have like a small neighborhood like Meadow Ridge?
Understand.
What if you have 20 homes in a small radius that have these chickens? I mean, it could be, I could see, there's just a lot of things there that really need to be considered, because, I mean, I don't know that this has been thought out enough to make the ordinance. I think some of this is too vague.
Were you also suggesting a permitting scheme as well?
Permitted to have the chickens? Oh, yeah.
So, but what we're suggesting is a simpler form where we have, it's just by right, and then if there's an issue with code enforcement, but I think what you're suggesting is that we would actually issue a permit?
They should be permitted. I
Okay.
mean,
The proposal that's before you tonight has certain conditions that are included to have the chickens by right. However, the recommendation to have a maximum number of households that are allowed to do that would require a different scheme than is being presented to you
Right.
tonight.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I understand,
You have a
absolutely.
neighborhood that's got 20 out of 30 houses. I mean, I don't think that would happen, but 20 out of 30 houses that would have chickens, I think that could be a little invasive to residents that don't like the chickens. There's a lot of things that I think that need to be considered in this.
Vice Chairman Sugar.
The other, I brought this up the last time we talked about this, and that's, do we have to have chicken police?
Well, you have code enforcement, so you have chicken police.
Okay, so my point is that, I think people start out with, good intentions when you have this type of thing. And unfortunately, it's like, you buy bunny rabbits for your kids, and you hope the kids will take care of them and so on. And the next thing you know, it doesn't happen. And so they're discarded, set in the wild, or just killed. So with this type of thing, what concerns me is, first of all, how are you going to have accountability? And if you get I'm for a permit. I think you should really have a permit for the chickens, and you should have to report how many chickens you have at any one time to make sure that you are within the guidelines recommended by the city. And then if for some reason, and it certainly can happen, that the chickens escape, who's going to chase them down? Who's going to do this? This is going to be a function of the city. And this is one reason why I think you need a little bit more accountability. And then if you have the chickens, I think, how do you prevent diseased chickens from spreading? You have the salmonella problem along with other things. So normally, a cat or a dog requires to go to the vet once a year and have shots, and you have your papers and all that. So it's very easy for a fowl like this chicken, which is kind of more or less free, except for it's being enclosed, getting disease, getting salmonella, especially if people aren't attentive to cleaning the chicken coop. And you also have the possibility of people like myself who encourage birds. I have bird feeders in my backyard. And so the spread of disease is very possible, even within wild birds, let alone having chickens. So I find this to be a little difficult in using small lots, like residential lots like where I am. I think if you have a half acre, it might be a better situation for the owners and the property owners in the immediate area. But using the normal residential lot, I just don't see this as, because people are not intentionally careless, but I can see after having chickens for a few months, you get tired of it. So the option is, one, to sell the chickens, pass them on to somebody else that may be not familiar with the laws or the ordinances, and not having the education in the background to understand what's required of them. So I have a problem with this unless you're talking about serious people really understanding what they're getting into. And that's just a broad comment of how I feel about it.
Okay.
All right, so part of the reason why I wanted to, for us, normally what I want to do is I want to open it to the public and have them speak first. But the reason why I'm not doing that this time is I wanted the board to be able to basically say their thoughts first, so when the audience does come up, you can tailor it to, you know what we're thinking and what to expect. I wanted to bring up something real quick. I guess maybe I'm a little loose on this. I mean, I've done farm work in the past. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I lived in Merritt Island and on Banana River Drive. And I remember we used to go to this Cuban family's house. They had chickens. It was real big. I mean, they had a lot of chickens. The number that we're talking about, 4 chickens. Chickens are female chickens, very, very quiet. I mean, they literally do not make any noise. They cluck here and there. The only thing that I would be nervous about is an owner not taking care of them, because they can stink. So I do like the fact that there is language in there that would say that, you know, they have to basically keep it clean. I think I don't know if it was Rockledge that had that in there. It was one of the cities that discussed that. I thought that language was very good because obviously, you know, somebody, in my opinion, if you are going to invest the money to build a pen and you're going to invest the time, you're going to take care of the chickens, but there may be some that don't. On the lot size, I do believe that you got to understand that a coop is very, very small. I mean, I think they require 4 feet apiece, and in reality, the chickens that lay eggs and the chickens that we eat are actually far less than that, far, far less than that. So 4 feet is actually rather large in comparison to what the industry gives, from my understanding. But as far as single-family homes, they don't take up a lot of space. The only thing that I would say is to make sure that it's not into R1 or R2, R3 in multifamily, where we don't allow them in multifamily zoning. Only because, well, I don't know. I mean, if you can craft something that's acceptable, I would say that too. But as far as the single-family homes, yes, I mean, it doesn't take up a lot of room. As far as the permitting, I do like the fact that if it's not just a permit where they have $5, at least if they register the code enforcement to say, hey, I have a chicken, no fee involved, but it's basically a registration process so that if there is a complaint, they can say, okay, they've registered with the city, they're at least in compliance that they've registered with us, and said that, and now we know that they're in compliance. We know that maybe if there's a class to take, that they would have taken a class. I kind of crossed at the neighborhood permission because when we talked about family gardening, I believed that a neighborhood should have approved the not family gardens, community gardens. I believed that community gardens should have got the permission of the neighbors because it was a change. As we've seen, community gardens have not really took off. But so this might be a consideration of staff to consider at least getting some permission from the neighbors if it is the perception that this could be a problem. But for me, I don't really care if there's permission on this because I know that the noise, and the footprint that it does take to have 4 chickens is very minimal. But I do believe that we need to have something for the odors and the cleanliness. And it may be that we just say, fine, let's do a pilot program. But at the same time, if we do a pilot program, then we need to also consider grandfathering those in that have chickens so that we can't just say, well, you're out of compliance, you can't have chickens anymore. Now keep in mind that when we annexed in the city, it was around, was it Kathy Drive, farther out, like by 405. There was a lot of homes in that area. If you were on the board back then, they came up and they said, "Hey, we have animals." Were you here when that happened?
No.
They had animals, and so the city had to come in and basically say, "Fine, it's acceptable." So if you look in our ordinance, we have the ability in. I was reading in here somewhere. We do have the ability to have chickens in the city, but I think it's in rural. I can't. Is it GU or I can't remember.
General use, which is, excuse me, a agricultural zoning, which does allow chickens.
But
Yeah.
we do have people off of over by the little Sisson. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
In that area, people were basically acknowledging that they had chickens. I used to work with a girl that lived here in Titusville. She had chickens, and in 2013, she was like, "I don't want nobody taking my chickens away." I'm like, "I think it's going to pass," and it didn't. But to this day, I don't believe that her neighbors even know that she has chickens. So, you know, I think that from what I've had personal experience with chickens, I don't think it's a huge deal. But I think that there should be some control up front initially to look at it to see if it's viable, rather than just cut it off.
Well, since I'm the only one that hasn't, are you finished? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm done.
I would like to just let everyone know where I stand. I am very much for chickens in yards for a bunch of different reasons. One of them being it's very unsettling when you have children thinking that their food actually comes from Publix. And I think it's a very important thing for education for all of us to understand where our food actually comes from. So I'm really big into animals and plants, and but I do understand that we, do live here in the city of Titusville, and I think a class, the 2-hour class that's talked about several times in here, is an excellent idea because, one, like you pointed out, chicken coops are expensive if you're buying them, or if you're building them, either one, it's an investment. But also, the chickens themselves nobody wants to have an animal that's not well taken care of, that's abused or neglected. And once you go through that class and you see how much work is actually involved, I think that will pare your people down pretty quickly right there, realizing this is not just something that stays in the backyard and you only have to do something once a week. It is a labor-intensive thing. It is a pet. These are pets in this situation. And so I think it's very important that everybody understands what's required going into it so that we don't have a lot of these issues that have been talked about tonight. I also think that if you are a tenant or a renter, you do need to get the property owner's permission in writing, because if your lease is up and you just leave, and you leave those chickens in the backyard because you don't have anywhere to take them, now that's a problem. So I think that is something that would need to be done just so we don't have a whole lot of unwanted pets, additional pets. So let me ask you a question. Does code enforcement have the right of entry on property?
The way that this ordinance is written, the coops would need to be in your backyard and enclosed within a fenced yard. And so code enforcement would not just enter into an enclosed backyard without permission from the owner. They would need an invitation from the owner for an inspection. And it's the owner's responsibility to call for an inspection if there's a notice of a violation posted on the property. And so the process would require code enforcement to respond to a complaint by going out and visiting the property. And if they see or smell the possibility of a complaint that may be founded there, then they would cite the property, and the property owner would then communicate with the code enforcement officer and invite them to, do that inspection and then come to terms with what needs to be done in order to have compliance.
Okay. I used to work for the Department of Agriculture, and we had right of entry into property. And we would give notice, but we would go in if there was not, if they didn't contact us for violations or for whatever we needed to do. And I also think that it would be probably a good idea, and I don't know if you can do this from what you're talking about right of, what you call it, right of,
I call it trespass.
no. Right of,
If the-
Entry.
if the-
Right of entry.
Right.
no, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about that anymore.
Okay.
I'm talking about, with the way the law is written, right of property, right of, for you to have chickens, period, so you're not doing a
It's
permit?
permitted right to have the chickens. the
Okay,
way that it's
permitted
written.
right, okay. So going to that now, if, other than a $250 a day fine, these people would be continuously allowed to continue with chickens if there's,
Code enforcement operates to have the ability to assess a daily fine of up to $250 per day per violation. And so if the code enforcement board finds the violation exists, they give a reasonable time to correct. And after that date passes, if the violation continues, then the fine would be assessed against the property owner, any a property that they own within Brevard County. This lien would be recorded on the public records, and it would encumber the title to that property until compliance is achieved and the lien is satisfied.
so you don't have any way of doing something about not
Taking
allowing them to
further
have
action?
chickens?
If there was an infestation of chickens, and the city wanted to control it in order to correct, I think that we could pursue the option of getting an injunction to have those chickens removed. I think that would be an extreme example. Typically, code enforcement is successful in getting compliance, and I think that that would be a way to achieve compliance with this issue. Of course, you never know what the extreme possibility could be.
Okay.
There's always a way to get compliance. If it couldn't be through code enforcement, I'm sure there's an alternate method to fix that problem.
A way of compliance there would also be for them to voluntarily give their chickens away. wouldn't
Absolutely,
it?
yeah.
Yes,
Compliance
okay.
could be achieved by abating that nuisance. That nuisance
Right.
could be having them go elsewhere, cleaning it up. It would be up to the owner and the code enforcement department to determine what would be the appropriate method of compliance.
Okay, I have another question for staff also. Why were ducks not allowed in this ordinance?
The direction we got from city council was specifically the chickens. That's a recommendation of yours. We can certainly provide that recommendation to city council.
I would really like to see ducks because actually ducks are so much better than chickens. The eggs taste better, have more personality, and they're quieter.
I
So,
always thought they were a little bit more
They're
noisy.
noisy with that
no,
quack,
much quieter.
And very,
I had
can be
ducks.
aggressive,
They can be pretty
a
noisy.
little bit there.
territorial.
Yes, they can be.
Member Baker, if I may just add, there's been discussion about maybe including some kind of permitting scheme. So let's say we have that kind of scheme in place. Now, if we need to go through some kind of action where we need to revoke the permit, that's one process. And then beyond that, if there's still an issue, then there's code enforcement. So the question to you is, do we have the tools in place already with code enforcement, or do we need an extra layer in order to resolve an issue, which will probably take more time? So that's why we tried to propose an ordinance that was as simple as possible based on some of the examples that we found. We could certainly come up with some kind of registration or notice or permitting scheme, but that's what we were going,
And I think that's an excellent idea, actually. I like your idea.
which is,
Not having a permit.
okay.
Because, but I do think that I think everybody needs to be educated to go into it. And you may not be able to force someone, but highly recommend. None of us want to see abused, neglected animals.
Just to point out, you're allowed to have domestic animals on your property, cats and dogs.
Right.
So we don't require a permit for those, but if there's an
Right.
issue or
But for
there's too many
chickens.
animals on the property, there's code enforcement, and we do have those tools in place to deal with that issue.
Right.
And that's how we looked at it with the
What about
chickens.
county animal control? Why can't they be
Mhm.
called?
I'm sorry?
County animal control.
I think if it was one of those extreme examples, that would be a solution that we would look to, because animal control has those tools in the toolbox to handle a high number of animals in one location if they need to be removed and relocated.
Maybe if that was just in code enforcement's process to say, this is what we've documented, you know, we've experienced, you know, neglected chickens, and, you know, they basically pass it on to animal control. I mean, that's just an internal process. And then the city, it can literally be resolved by the county.
Has there been any study done by Rockledge or Palm Bay? How many people own chickens within a square mile radius, each square mile?
I do
would
not,
get-
we do not have that data, but if that's,
I bet you the money is probably way less than 10%, if that much. Everybody don't want chickens, you know? Maybe 1 or 2 people like chickens, but the other 20 or 30 probably go, I ain't have no chickens running around here. I ain't feeding no chickens. I bet you it's the problem we got in our mind. But I bet you any money if you look and see if they did a study on it, I bet you very few people have
Well,
chickens.
I mean, but it's the same as, you know, potbelly pigs. I mean, that was an issue several years back. A lot of people don't have potbelly pigs. I mean, although it's a different animal, I mean, these are not your traditional animals that you get. On the other side, well, it's a different world. People, I mean, I have a lady that drives from, gosh, she drives like 2.5 hours to work every day. She brings in eggs every day, and she gives them out to coworkers. I mean, I don't take them because, well,
Pigs?
I'm not going to eat. I want store-bought eggs. So, my point is that it is a changing world. It is more common for people to have chickens, even in the city. So, I mean, it's what I read is that it is minimal, very minimal in the cities, but I think it's just being asked to have that possibility to do it.
I think that the only problem is the odds are maybe you won't have a neighbor that gets chickens. However, if you get a neighbor who has chickens, you are the one that's stuck with it. You're saying, okay, there's not going to be that many. True. But if you happen to have that one homeowner next to you that has these chickens and they become a nuisance, then it is a problem. So you can disregard the rest of the city, but it only takes one.
What if
So,
that neighbor has a big old dog?
and if it's next to you, it's a problem. If it's not next to you, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something that you have to take into account.
Yeah, some neighbors can have a big old dog too, and Great Danes or something. You want to complain because he's got a big dog, you know?
Well, I've had that situation recently, I can tell you about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing is, I think that with the right of entry, if you're going to allow this to happen, I do think that you should have a permit and pay for it. And I think that gives you more control. I think it lets you know who's got the chickens and where they are, and it gives you a chance to record that ahead of time, so that when you have a complaint, you do have a record of it. And the other thing is the right of entry. You know, I think that if you're going to do this, the person that's applying for the permit needs to sign off that they've read all of the enforcement requirements, okay, that the city has imposed or wants to impose on them. And that's the reason, another reason for having the fee, the permitting fee, so that when they come and pay the fee, you give them, this is what we require. If you're going to have chickens, this is what you have to do. This is part of our code. And so that helps them to understand this is serious business. This is not just willy-nilly, I'm going to try it, let's see if I like it or not. So that's why you have the fee, and that's why I would have people sign off on all the requirements and regulations that they are supposed to uphold and enforce, so that they can't come back later and say, oh, I didn't know, I wasn't aware. And also, when you have the right of entry to inspect, you also need to have something in there about you can't abandon these chickens. You can't abandon them, you just can't set them loose because you're tired of them. So there's got to be something in there that says, okay, if you no longer want these chickens, you need to notify somebody, who I don't know. I don't know who they would go to in such a case. But if you have a permit and you only have 4 chickens and that's what you signed up for, and you want to abandon those chickens, then you need to abandon them with some kind of record. I sold them. I gave them to Mrs. Jones. I turned them into the city. I did something with them. Because you're not allowed to kill them on your property. You're not allowed to slaughter them on your property. So there's got to be something in there that takes care of that problem. And also, if the chickens do happen to get out of their enclosure, and you do have to call a code enforcement or who's ever involved in rounding them up, who pays for this? I mean, this you know, whoever spends the time having to go after them, it costs money. They're employees of the city. And so there's got to be some consequence for allowing them to escape and not taking care of them properly. And that's all I can think of at the present. Thank you.
Okay, so we had quite a bit of comment, suggestions. Why don't we do this, open up to the public, and then let's listen to them speak. And then we'll close it after that, and then bring it back for the board for a wrap-up. Okay, so who do we have first?
We have Beatrice Blanco Chamberlain.
Okay.
I'm Beatrice. All of these wonderful people are here for the backyard chickens. A couple of things of note. The issue with spacing, specifically, chickens need 4 square feet per bird. That's it, and that's for your big chickens. Chicken comes in all. They all come in all sizes. I mean, you have ones that are this big, and you have ones that are this big. The smaller chickens obviously don't need as much room. So depending on the type of chicken that you purchase, you are not going to need as much space. So 4 square feet per bird is generally considered a perfectly adequate amount of space. So you figure a 16 by 16 foot coop is going to fit 4 chickens, and that is not. I mean, 16 by 16 square feet it's not enormous. This is not an enormous coop that we're talking about. So space-wise, they are not going to take up a very large amount of space. Noises and smells are another one. Chickens they do cluck. Obviously, they're hens. Hens do cluck, and they occasionally will sing something called an egg song. When they lay an egg, they'll occasionally sing a song, and it's cute. But other than that, they're no louder than your average conversation. Your barking dog that lives next door to you is at 70 decibels per average, and your clucking chicken is 25, just to give you a comparison. So if you live next door to a noisy dog, you're going to know that dog's there way more often than you're going to know the chickens are there. Smells, obviously, that's on the owner to take care of the coop, which is built into the ordinance, that the coop must be well maintained and well cared for. So if you're going to have the chickens, you know when you agree to do this that it is in the ordinance that it is required of you to maintain this coop and make sure that it is clean and the chickens are well cared for. I do think it's a good idea to have class. I do believe that there's a lot of people who probably don't have a whole lot of information on how to take care of chickens properly, and I think a class would go a long ways towards educating them and probably dissuading some people who think, hey, this is a great idea to have chickens, but once they realize the amount of work that is involved, it probably will dissuade them from doing it. So that means that you're only going to get the people who really want to have these birds, that really want to care for these animals, and who actually love these animals. We have a serious stray cat problem in the city, and code enforcement takes care of them, and the taxes take care of that. So if you get a chicken that gets free, I mean, I imagine that the same people who go after your stray cats and dogs are going to go after your chickens. So I don't really see how that is any different. And I think that's all I got right now.
I have a question for
Sure.
you. You were talking about the size of the chicken. You said there's some that are like this big?
No. So thinking from the bottom of this thing to here. So,
Okay.
I mean, the small chickens are small. I mean, I don't even actually know how many species of chickens there are. I couldn't tell you, I don't know off the top of my head. But you have some chickens that they take up less than 1 square foot per bird. Where you have your other larger show chickens, especially because show chickens are a thing, trust me. They're big and they're fluffy. Those are your 4 to 5 square feet per bird type of thing, so. But they're small, they don't need a lot of room. And I mean, that's for personal use too. I mean, if you think of a factory farm, your average chicken's gonna have a much smaller footprint than 4 square feet. They don't, a lot of the times they have maybe 1 to 2 square feet per bird in a factory farm.
I've been around chickens myself, but I've just never seen any that are.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've seen all the big fluffy ones,
Yeah.
or the show chickens, but
Yeah.
I've never seen one that's like really big. So just wondered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So who's seen the internet about was it Brahma chicken? The big chicken?
Big rooster.
I never.
It was a
rooster,
rooster, it was a
yeah.
rooster,
Well,
yeah.
I never wanted a chicken until I saw that. I wanted a big Brahma chicken.
Yeah, those are
But,
roosters, yes, sir.
that was really cool, but I live in multifamily, so.
There you go.
Next card.
Marjorie Mansfield.
Thank you guys for your consideration on this. There's a couple things I wanted to bring up, specifically kind of what Rose was talking on. I encourage you, if you have the time, to look at the city council meeting. A majority of us here have attended, where the UF Ag Extension agent actually took a good amount of time and explained a lot of the issues that have already been brought up tonight by the board. Specifically speaking to diseases, he spends quite a bit of time on that. But diseases outside of salmonella that a chicken could get are non-transferable to humans. Salmonella you can get from the feces, the meat, but you can get that from the meat you get from Walmart or from Publix. So it's not, you can't really box that in on that specifically from having the chicken in the backyard. Additionally, a lot of times the chickens that you're gonna have in the backyard are 100% typically more cared for than a factory farm chicken, which on average have 6 inches per bird. And that's it. They don't go outside, they don't stand up, they don't see the light. And so these are pets. These are not commercial farm animals. Animals that we're getting. The half-acre requirement was brought up within the city is very unattainable. You're not going to have half-acre lots in residential areas. Again, the ag agent specifically talked to this as well. He said on average 2 by 2 would be perfectly fine for a bird, but as we're looking at it as pets, you're not going to have more room to move around and to be a chicken. Coop sizes, they come in all varying sizes, and a lot of people spend a lot of time, a lot of money on them. I think the chicken people that you're going to get, not all of the chickens, are people who have actually invested time and are very invested in their animals. I am of the mind that I like the class. I really like the class. I think it's very educational. You're not going to have a huge influx of chickens in the neighborhood. 20 people in the neighborhood with chickens just seems very extreme. I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah. Smells, of course, any animal can smell that you don't take care of. If your neighbor doesn't pick up after the dog, it's going to smell on a hot day. It's Florida, it's summer, it bakes it. So I don't think that, can be a valid issue on this. I'm not a fan of asking my neighbors for permission to own an animal. They don't ask me to bring their dog in, their cat. They don't ask me to bring in their snakes, their lizards, anything that is already actually allowed. In the state of Florida, you can own a toucan without registering it. So I think that asking my adjacent neighbor and then a house next to me who's vacant, there's other issues that you're having that. What if you're only on one side and then there's no one behind you and then the house next to you is vacant? Are you going to hold up that person from owning an animal that technically by right you should be able to have? It's a pet. Chickens are domesticated. We're not bringing in alligators. They are a domesticated animal. And even in ordinance, there's a 10-foot setback from any property line, so you're not going to have it butt up against someone's house. It's got to be in your backyard. Additionally, chickens typically don't roam. They're not a cat. They stay close to home. I've had chickens growing up. I've never lost one before it running off. And it's not. They don't, and they always come home to roost. I've never lost one. Just by the property. And then I have neighbors who have chickens that I don't ever hear them. I grew up next to chickens, and I live in Titusville. I was born and raised here. And Just, they don't watch questions.
No, I agreed with your argument on the, I agree with you saying about their pets, their animals, about the permission. It kind of does, I mean, it does make sense. So, all right, well, thank you. Any more cards?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Lindsay DeShetler.
Hello.
Sorry I'm late, I thought it'd start at 6:30, so I didn't hear the beginning of your meeting. But I just want to let you know, I am also for chickens. And 4, I think, is acceptable, but for me personally, I only plan to get 2. So not everybody's going to go out and max out. And I just wanted to show my support. I don't really have much more to add because they've already pretty much covered everything. And thank you for considering this and bringing it up today. Thank you.
No other cards.
Okay. All right, so we'll close this to the public, bring it back before the board. Discussion on this. Well, I'll just mention, I didn't have a problem with this back in 2013. Been around it. I don't see that it's a huge deal, but obviously I'm one vote. I think you even said yourself that you were around chickens, so you know that they're not loud. I know roosters are. Somebody has a rooster over off of. I leave the gym and I hear it in the mornings at 6 in the morning over by the old Kmart. So,
Is that legal?
but anyway, but generally hens are not noisy. I think I agree that permitting is a bit much, but I do think that it would be wise to at least register with the city and then prove that you maybe took the class. Apparently the class is a good input, a good educational. So although you're not permitting it, it makes it a little bit more difficult to get compliance if they don't take the class. But it may be that they take the class and they say, okay, we've had the class and we're registering now and we just want to say that we're going to have it. So that way there's less input from staff. I know that you're worried about the resources that it would take. Code enforcement is probably concerned with that, and they don't want to be inundated. In essence, in reality, I don't think that there would be more than 25 tops.
Requiring a class or conditions of that sort would mean that we would have to have some kind of process where we check that off and then sign off on permission,
Yeah.
basically. So that to me would only be allowed. That would only work with a permitting scheme. I would.
I think we could come up with another
But,
way.
Yeah.
but we could. I mean, I guess.
I'm just saying that, yes, it is a permit, but it's not. It's more of a registration saying, hey, I got this, and here's my proof of insurance, I don't know.
Okay, but not providing that registration with the city, and not taking that class, but meeting all the other conditions.
That should be a requirement.
Okay. All right,
And I
that's-
say that because I think that code enforcement should know in advance if somebody's making a complaint that, okay, they have chickens. Yes, it's a valid complaint. When they don't register, then it should be considered a violation.
Right.
Okay.
Well, like Vice Chairman Shavir said, dogs and cats have to be licensed. I mean,
True.
They have to be licensed and registered, and
True.
I just think it's a good idea.
Okay.
But I'm only bringing that up to encourage education, encourage to help code enforcement, but not to add to their schedule, not to add to, I think, dropping off saying, hey, I've done this, and I'm going to have 4 chickens at, on Washington Avenue. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of this, though. I really don't. I mean, who here wants chickens?
Aren't there a lot of code enforcement issues right now?
I mean, I don't think you're going to see a lot of it. I do know that they do have people in Titusville with chickens already. But obviously, if it was a problem, we would have heard about it already.
Well, go ahead. I was just asking Chelsea
That's what I'd say.
that there are pending cases with code enforcement right now.
That they have chickens?
Yes.
And so what was code enforcement's response to that?
The council has directed staff to draft an ordinance to allow chickens. And so this issue has come up over the past couple of months, and code enforcement has pending cases, pending the resolution of this ordinance. And then the requirements that this ordinance would impose would be relayed back to those pending cases in order to come into compliance within a reasonable period of time.
Unless they were grandfathered in.
I don't see any grandfathering language.
But I'm just saying, I'm just mentioning that.
I don't think that there's any grandfathering with the maintenance requirements. I think that they would be held to the same standard as every chicken owner
Okay.
throughout the city.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question, not a
Yes, sir.
comment. If you're going to do this, okay, the only way I could support this, okay, is with a permit. I will not support this unless the city comes up with a permit. And there are certain information that I think if people are going to have the chickens, and these folks obviously are professionals, they understand how to do this, okay? But a lot of people, I guarantee you, like the idea, oh, I want to have a chicken. I want chickens that lay eggs. This is what we're going to do. And that's the person that doesn't have the experience or the background or the understanding of what it's like to have a chicken. And those are the people that need the permitting process so that they understand the requirements that the city puts on them for having chickens. It's very easy for someone to drive by and say, hey, you know, we can have chickens. Let's just have a chicken coop and we'll try this. That's what you don't want. What you want is someone to understand that there's a responsibility like any good pet owner has to owning a pet and taking care of it. And you're not going to get that. Chickens somehow are not the same standard as a dog or a cat. They're like, it's just a bird. So I think requiring the permit and having people understand what the requirements are beforehand. I would like to see, quite frankly, if someone comes in for the permit, they want to have chickens, you got to wait 48 hours so that you take this home, you understand what you're reading, and you sign off on it. Okay, you get the permit. Here you are. Go for it. But that's what I would like to see. And I'm not against chickens per se, but I have a pretty good idea that you have good owners that understand the process and take care of the chickens, and then you're going to have careless people who buy bunny rabbits at Easter time just for the sake of buying it, and they abandon them, they just let them go and don't take care of them. And that's my concern. So I think we need to have a process in place so the city can enforce the rules, they have something to go by, and everybody understands what the game is.
Okay.
They're not allowed to sell chickens at Easter anymore, are they?
Well, they do. So, I was driving through Mims several months back, and I can't remember the farm I don't know if it's farm implement and they said, we have chicks, all right?
Ace in Titusville sells chickens.
So I thought, oh man, this is trouble. They're causing trouble. Because I got to my parents' house and I know that my niece's son told his mother he wanted chicks. And they caused a problem in their house. But I thought to myself, I'm like, man, this was before we heard about this. I thought, I wonder how many people from Titusville went out to Mims, or now I guess Ace, but got them. But anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So, I think a permit's fine. I mean, even if you could do it without a fee, but a registering permit or something. I think that's a reasonable request of the city. I think that's also a way to, if you want to recoup some funds, okay. It's a small fee. But I do think it would be good to get compliance with the class. It would be get good for compliance on, look, we have chickens in our backyard, and the city knows, so that way that it tells them up front when they have a complaint, this person that they're going to hasn't gone through the education class, most likely. I don't think that it might be that, because this is going to be an issue later, it should probably transfer to the owner, not to the property. You follow me what I'm saying? provided that the property wherever they move to is not multifamily or, you know, because I know that that'll be a question that you have later. And I think that it gets compliance. I don't think that they should have to go out and inspect, but I think it's basically just say, hey, this is the rules, and if we come out and you don't have a 32-foot cage, bear in mind, or was it not even that, 16?
16 square feet.
Think of it like this: an 8x4 sheet that you see that people board up their windows, that's 32 square feet, and this is half of that. It's very minor. It's a very, very minor impact on the backyard. Chickens themselves are going to be minor. I thought it was a good point about dogs. Dogs are a lot more noisier. I know that I know a lady that has a parakeet, and I hear that thing like crazy. Parakeets are noisier than chickens. So
And you don't need a permit to have one.
so it's not like I'm trying to pick up the argument, but I just don't believe. I think the city has made the issue of backyard chickens too harsh. I think we control things a bit much. If we went back to the 1930s, I think everybody had chickens, right?
They did,
I think.
yeah.
So
It was required.
it was required.
It was, you were expected to keep backyard chickens, but.
So
But
I'm
you know,
just,
but we live in it, this is 2017, come on, you know.
I can't say we're more
Let's-
civilized.
Yeah,
but-
we are. Come on, let's face it. We're a little bit more civilized, and we're not out in the boondocks. We don't have neighbors that don't have fences. Come on, let's get real. So, the thing is, are you going to come up with something after what we've said here and bring it back to us?
It depends on the vote that's made tonight and the motion makers, the conditions that are included within the motion maker's motion.
Right.
Generally speaking, if you are inclined to recommend a permitting process, then staff would need to go back to the drawing board. And I would recommend that you make a motion to deny the ordinance as written, because there's an entirely different scheme that would need to be presented by staff. Brad?
That's correct. I would agree with that. We would have to come, your recommendation would be for denial on condition that with the recommendation that there would be some kind of permitting scheme or registration scheme, and that when this goes before city council, we'll present that to them.
All right, so then,
However, I want to just add a little bit more, because there's some other things that I heard tonight that could be included the way that it was presented. If the motion maker was inclined to make a motion that this ordinance be approved with additional conditions, such as a minimum lot size or taking a class, those things could be worked into the ordinance the way that it was drafted.
all right, so then what I'll do at this time is, I can't remember, I hardly ever do this, pass the gavel, is that what you call it?
You can.
And then I'll make a motion,
Okay.
okay? This will be on you.
Okay.
All right, so I would like to make a motion that we approve adding backyard chickens, approving an ordinance, but I would like to modify this for staff.
Now okay.
That we, and here's the modifications for this, that we go through a permitting process, but does not necessarily mean that it's fee-based. The applicants must have a class. I can't remember if you have odors and cleanliness, but I do believe that we should have that in the language as well, similar to other ordinances. That it should be limited to single-family residences. And was there any more condition? I think that covered what we talked about. And
All of these, actually.
then owners, which page is that?
This is page 23.
Owners can't abandon chickens, I don't know, I mean, that's a given. All right, so you kind of get the gist of my motion, and then you guys listening to what I'm saying, is,
Chairman Williams, your conditions were staff included permit process. They limit the permitted, where chickens can be allowed only on single-family lots, which I think we've already included in, it's a first condition.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry, I missed the other ones that you suggested.
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness, which is,
it's in there.
which I believe we've already included
okay,
in
And then the last one.
letter F.
In the
Okay.
class.
But the class was the last one, right? It's the last
So
condition?
the class is
Okay.
basically the major modification, right? Permit and class.
Would you be okay calling the permitting process registration if it was just simply registering the chicken ownership?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Because that would be better than, the difference is that it'd be mandatory registration. You gotta understand that, is that, so it is permitting. And it forces the class. There's no difference.
I always think people should have skin in the game if they're serious. And to me, paying a permitting fee is part of that, having skin in the game, so to speak. It shows that you're really serious about it, and you're willing to put up the money up front. So that, I mean, that's just my personal
Okay.
opinion.
Is there a second for discussion?
It's second, and I'd like to say that the permit, I agree with you on that, but I think when you are talking about the amount of money you're going to have to spend on the chicken coop, if you buy it already made, or if you make it yourself, is putting your money up front.
Well, I don't know how
on
much a
that.
fee would be. I mean, you're going to charge $25. It's not an exorbitant amount of money.
I can tell you that in section 5-101 has to do with permitting of horses. There's a fee of $25.
I mean, so, I mean, it just, to me, when you put money up front, it just shows that you're serious and you're taking this seriously. And then it gives the city the opportunity to pass along the basic information and requirements that people expect. And if you're going to pay that $25, you're going to sign off on it. Yeah, I've read all of this, and here's my $25, and I understand it.
You understand that they're gonna be taking a class that they will have to pay for, so that is, in essence,
Right.
skin in the game. So, chicken safety, I don't know, like hunter safety, of course. All right, so we have, oh, sorry, you're the chair, so go ahead.
No, I mean, that's my only thing. I think what we're presenting here is reasonable, and my personal opinions aside. So you have to look at the greater picture. And so I would like staff to draw something up and bring it back to us, unless you want to take a vote on this the way we're presenting it
There's
tonight.
a motion on the table.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
basically what the motion does, is it says this, we like this, we're approving it, put these changes, and, right? These are the changes that we were requesting.
Can we take a moment, for just a recess, so I can speak with the city attorney?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to bring up wanted to make sure that any changes you're proposing here was not going to require this ordinance to have to come back to you again.
I didn't
Sounds like
think
the
so.
changes.
Generally, and this is why I'm saying this. I know that no matter what, it's gonna go to council, and they're gonna write it the way that is acceptable to what they want. So,
But I needed to make sure that you can have a motion that would fit with your ordinance title And
So,
the
okay.
recommendation that you have made is consistent with the title because it is loose enough that it says it's permits for certain animals required by permitting backyard chickens subject to regulations. And I think that additional regulations would meet the intent of that title.
Okay.
So we can propose your recommendations with the revised ordinance to City Council at their next meeting or at the public hearing.
Okay.
Cool.
Because here's the thing, I think you guys sent me a copy of this a long time ago. I was surprised that it took this long to get here. But then I actually did watch City Council meeting. Somebody posted online, one of you ladies.
Yeah.
And I watched it through all 3 hours. And, you know, I do believe this is gonna pass City Council. You have one member that is not excited, but I didn't really hear too much from the others.
Well, everybody else was on board except for the one
Yes.
person.
So I think that if it's tailored to what is acceptable, because I do think it's going to pass this time. And I think by having input in, it gets a little bit more creative. It gives them a little bit more to work with than what they had yesterday. So you're the chair now, and so we're going by.
Do we have a motion to accept the ordinance regulating backyard chickens with the recommendations made by us and covered by staff? I don't have everything exactly lined up as you have it there, unless you want to repeat those.
The motion that was made by Member Williams and seconded by Member Baker is acceptable to the city, and I think that we're fit to take a vote. The recommendations are to include a requirement that the owners register and take a class, and those recommendations will be added to the presentation to council on Tuesday night, if it is approved by this group.
Should we just take a vote?
And
Yes,
you're
sir.
not- And
Okay.
you're not limiting the lot size.
I'm sorry?
No. No, it's to single family, which understand that you're gonna have some lot sizes that are some single family R1, or they're gonna be technically non-conforming because they're grandfathered in. They would not be large enough to fit into our current code anyway. So you can't say that I want single family and then, well, I guess you could, but I think it'd just be difficult. And when you're talking no more than, that much, I mean, is it 2 by 2 or 4 by 4 feet? 4 by 4. That's very minimal.
Most homes don't have a half acre of land anyway. Most single family homes around here.
All right.
Can we review what we recommended to staff? Do you have that based on what we're recommending?
The motion?
The motion, yes, do you have that?
Your motion is to approve the ordinance with a couple changes, that there be a condition that a registration process be included, and that a class be required.
And I do have one other question. The right of entry, I made a little note here. Are we going to do that? That's part of what you originally recommended, the right of entry to inspect a property?
There's no permission to trespass the property written into the ordinance. If there's a violation, a code enforcement officer would need an invitation to go into the enclosed backyard in order to inspect.
Okay. So how does that, okay, that doesn't sound like a very, how often does that happen? You get permission to go on someone's property to make an inspection?
If the owner has a violation on their property that they would like to obtain compliance for, then that would be an opportunity for code enforcement to go into their backyard if they have the permission of the owner. And if there's a violation on site, then in most cases, the owner wants it to stop and would have that inspection performed.
And
It'd be
yet,
the same with the horse, though. I mean, they don't have right of entry for a horse, or a dog, or a...
verify the violation if you can't see it? I mean,
Yeah, that was my thing, if you don't, if.
That's the way it
how do
is
you know
about
this?
everything.
Yeah, I mean, how do
Seriously.
Yeah, you can't.
how do you correct a violation if you can't get to see it? I mean, if the property owner says, no, I'm not gonna let you on our property, what do you do?
Then the violation would continue. The code enforcement board has to review evidence of any violation before they make a finding of fact.
Okay.
An initial inspection by an officer does not amount to a lien against a property. There is testimony and evidence that gets presented to the board after a thorough review of each case is performed, and several inspections are performed for every case in order to ensure that there is documented evidence of a violation.
And that's why I was saying that it could be an administrative function to just pass it on to the animal control. And so they can get access a lot easier than code enforcement. So, I mean, at least that's what my belief is, but you're the lawyer, so that's what I've seen.
So I make a motion to, oh, I'm sorry, you did it already. Okay, sorry.
I have
Hey,
second
you
motion.
can't make
that's
a-
already-
You can't make a motion
I already
because
seconded
you're
it.
You
chair
seconded?
now.
Right,
Okay.
We're ready
It's
for
already
vote.
been seconded, so.
second,
That's why I
okay.
gave it to you. You're
I'm sorry, I'm behind here. I'm a little bit off, I'm a little off kilter here. So we have a motion on the floor to, we have a roll call.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Chambers,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir,
Yes.
Member Baker,
Yes.
Member Ritchie,
no.
Chairman Williams.
Yes.
And I'll say my biggest reason is I think the lot sizes should be limited. I mean, some of these lots are like 0.1, 0.9 acres, and I think that's too small.
Okay.
Well, sure.
Otherwise, I would have said yes.
We'll pass that, that concern on to the city council.
You're still chair.
Oh, I'm still chair, okay. So I'm going to pass it back to, having taken that vote and motion, pass this back to Chairman Williams.
Okay, so motion passes, and when does this go before city council?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Next Tuesday. All right. So you've been there before, you know exactly what you got to do. You know exactly what's been said here, and you know what our motion is. I would suggest, you know, that show up, be heard, and okay. Well, good luck. Okay, can we,
I just want to make sure that the public understands that there'll be 2 meetings with the city council.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
so if we'll go to the next item, which is motorcycles in urban village zoning.
So the next item on your agenda is another ordinance that was directed by the city council for staff to create. Has to do with amending the land development regulations, specifically the urban village zoning district. At the June 13th city council meeting, Mr. Doug Kaiser with Excel Project Management requested the council grant advisability for staff to explore the options of allowing motorcycle sales and service within the urban village zoning district. Council directed staff to analyze these options and to allow motorcycle sales within that same zoning district. The included ordinance addresses the request to allow motorcycle sales in the UV. If approved, the ordinance will amend the LDRs to allow sales and service of motorcycles. In addition, it will also allow for the outdoor display of motorcycles only during hours of operation of the associated business. All service activities will be required to be conducted within an enclosed building, and no service or bay doors will be allowed to be oriented towards a right-of-way. Proposed changes have been reviewed by Excel Project Management and requested staff move forward with the version of the ordinance included in this agenda item. So I'll briefly describe the changes that are being proposed in this ordinance. On page 27 of your packet, you'll see the city's zoning use matrix. And under commercial, you'll see a use there called automobile sales. We've included the term vehicle to kind of clarify exactly what that means. And in that same row, you'll see under the UV zoning district,
the letter L, what that means is that this use would be permitted with certain limitations. It would not require any kind of special conditional use permit. Then it refers to another section of the code, 28-98, and those were the conditions that are being proposed. So on page 32 of your packet starts the conditions. We've included clarifying language in the definition of automobile sales. We've also added a new paragraph 4 under the conditions and standards of a permitted uses with limitations for automobile vehicle sales. And this new subparagraph 4 is specifically to the UV zoning district. If you recall, the UV district is located on 2 properties in the city. One is the Titus Landing project, and that's where this would apply. It would also apply on the second property that has the UV zoning district if it is developed. And that property is located at the southwest corner of, or just west of US 1, south of Cheney, a few properties south of Cheney. If you recall, there's a large open piece of property there that actually has the zoning district on there.
Okay, is that it?
I'll just briefly describe the conditions in here. We included language in here that would require motorcycle sales to be located in proximity to the principal building. If you recall, Titus Landing is a large shopping plaza, so wherever a motorcycle sales is going to be located, they're going to have any kind of outdoor display of motorcycles that has to be in close proximity to that particular business and not anywhere else on the property. It would limit outdoor motorcycle sales to an area less than or equal to 15% of the gross floor area of the building or unit in which the use is conducted. Shall have all outdoor motorcycle sales meet the following locational criteria. And so we've included some setback criteria, or basically distance criteria, to protect intersections, pedestrian ways, roadway access ways, and a outside vending location, building exits, and a fire hydrant. And that's under paragraph F. We've also included a condition that outdoor motorcycle sales to only during the hours of operation of the associated business, and goods displayed outdoors shall not be left outdoors when the associated business is not operating. And this was a concern by Mr. Excel is what I'm thinking. Kaiser, excuse me. Shall conduct all service and repair of motorcycles within an enclosed building, and the bay or service doors oriented towards the public. It shall not be oriented towards the public right of way. The use shall not include paint booths outside, shall not have outdoor storage, and shall not include it as part of operations, riding lessons, or motorcycle license classes or testing. Further down on page 35 of your packet, we've included some clarifying language under the use of outdoor display of merchandise, and that's under our accessory use standards. So on page 35 of your packet, again, under paragraph C1F, you'll see that red language there. We've included some clarifying language about what the outdoor display of materials means. And that is the gist of this ordinance. I'll try and answer any questions you have about it.
Okay. I just want to mention real quick that I've said this before, but this is an exception. I don't like changing code for one use like this, but in this case, I can understand why this is really the only option you can go to for this. I can understand that. But at the same time, rather than just open it up to this, why is it possible to open it up to other uses at the same time? I know that we're opening it up to motorcycles, but what about recreational vehicles in general?
We had a discussion about maybe allowing automobile sales in general as a permitted use inside the UV zoning district. That's currently not allowed.
No, I know that. That's a bit much because I do believe that automobile sales would get out of control, and we just, in the last several years, put regulation to curb some of that in this area, well, downtown. But I could say that this would be a very similar reasoning, that you don't want to, you want to get more out of that use out of that land, I believe. But we have, currently you have Space Coast, Yamaha, that they sell motorcycles, they sell jet skis, they sell small boats. My point is that what if Harley Davidson, and my understanding is that I think that they may be closing up some shops. So Harley Davidson decides a year from now that this is not conducive to our business and we're leaving. Now you have the ability for a jet ski shop or another motorcycle shop that also has other uses to it to come in and replace that and be reutilized. And that's kind of my point.
Okay.
Yes, I can understand not putting automobiles, but if we're going to open it up for one use, then it might be prudent to say, hey, we know that motorcycles is acceptable, jet skis is very similar, but no large boats, maybe no boats, I don't know, or no large boats, but.
I think you can appreciate how difficult that would be to clarify,
I do.
distinguish between.
I do, but it could be that no boats, just like we did the one, no boats larger than 16 feet. That is how we clarified one about putting in trailers or parking. Yeah. So I'm just saying that there is. I think my personal take is that if we're opening this up for one particular use, we should probably go ahead and make it conducive to be able to evolve and change 10 years from now if Harley isn't there. Just kind of think of it like an escape plan.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
In reference to that, I'm looking at, we have commercial automobile / vehicle sales. And of course, it says, the code is L, it says permitted subject to limitations. So I'm asking, why is that even there, automobile? In other words, either you're allowing it or you're not. And how do I interpret permitted subject to limitations? Why is automobile even there? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me offhand looking at it.
Automobile sales,
I mean, yeah.
it's a permitted use right now in the community commercial and the regional commercial zoning district.
Okay, right.
So you can have a car dealership.
Okay, but not in urban village.
Look on
Correct.
page 32.
Yeah.
Page 32.
That's where you distinguish it.
You can see the limitations that are specific to UV under number 4, and in the other specific zoning categories that have limitations or conditions, they're called out before number 4 on page 32.
Right, so the other zoning districts, they allow automobile sales with certain conditions, generally automobile sales, so you have a car dealership. But in the UV, we're limiting it specifically just to motorcycles.
But if somebody wanted to come in with automobile sales, you would allow it?
In this
also?
zoning district?
Yeah.
In the UV, no. It would be specific, as you see in the conditions we're proposing here, specific to motorcycles, as defined in Chapter 320 of the Florida statutes.
Which conditions are on 33, continues on the next page.
Right.
I mean, okay. I mean, I get what you're saying, but why even mention automobiles if it's not there? I mean, if it's not supposed to be there.
We've thought this was the best way to allow what the city council was requesting, as opposed to creating a brand-new use.
It generally is an automobile sales, vehicle sales, but we're just limiting it only to motorcycles.
I said, why can't you
with it.
just use motorcycle? And why even mention automobile? My point is, someone can come in and challenge you on that. I mean, you're not supposed to have automobile sales, right?
I'm not sure where the challenge would be because it's specific just to only motorcycles, as per the conditions.
Yeah, I thought you had a definition in there. It says shall be, on the top of 33A, it says shall be limited to sales and accessory services of motorcycles as defined by chapter 320. Is that basically narrows it down to only
Correct.
motorcycles?
Correct.
Okay, my point, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but why mention automobiles at all? Because if it's not.
Because
gonna be allowed.
they've taken automobiles and they said automobiles include trucks, motorcycles, some other things, right?
Right, I mean, in this community commercial zoning district right now, you can have a car dealership of any type of vehicle.
I accept that.
Yeah,
It just sounded, if you're not allowing, my point is that if you're not allowing automobiles, but you're mentioning it, so why even mention it? Just put motorcycles, scooters, whatever else, other than automobiles, but that's just.
I think what you're suggesting is creating a brand-new use. I think that's the only other option we could have had done, but we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to create another use. We want to try and incorporate these conditions within our existing uses.
Okay.
I think
Could-
you're talking about commercial uses and like in the RMU, it's permitted. It's permitted under RMU 400, so. But you're talking about exclusively for the UV designation to be limited. Just that one's going to be limited to motorcycles, not the other one.
Correct, right. If you,
That's what he's.
correct. That's what we're trying to propose here. If we created a brand-new use with just motorcycles, we'd have to include that inside the use table that's up further on your, and by doing that, then we have to consider, okay, if we specifically state it's only allowed in UV as a brand-new use in that use table, now we got to look at the other zoning districts. Where are motorcycles also allowed? And it just didn't make sense to us to create another use when we have one existing that we could just modify.
That's your
Yeah.
explanation, okay.
Yeah, I apologize, I was
That's
trying
okay.
to.
No, that's okay. I didn't quite understand why we were mentioning automobiles
Okay.
that specifically.
What
All right.
about gasoline sales?
There is, as part of this particular use, or in general?
That's anywhere at the mall.
Okay.
CUP. We did have a CUP, and that's since expired. It is possible to do gasoline at the mall, but it's still by conditional use.
There was, yeah, if you recall, there was an ordinance that was requested to allow a gasoline station basically, or pumps. And that was adopted to be allowed in this particular zoning district.
Okay.
I have one question. How about, you're going to do any minor body work? Is that going to be what's,
We've included conditions that any kind of, there would be, that kind of activity would happen inside. Under H, page 33 of your packet, shall conduct all service and repair of motorcycles within an enclosed building.
okay, but I want to clarify. When you say repairs, you're talking, there's such a thing as engine repair, changing gaskets and so on and so forth.
Correct.
But that doesn't, you're not talking about body repair or anything like that because you don't allow painting, right? So I'm assuming that you're not going to be able to do body work per se.
Well, our intention was any kind of body work, modification of the motorcycles, repair wouldn't be enclosed in it. All those kind of activities would happen in an enclosed building, and we can certainly clarify that language.
Okay, but my point is, you're not going to have a paint booth, so if you're going to do any body work on the motorcycle, you're going to have to take it somewhere else to have it painted? I mean, is that,
It
doesn't...
could be sent out anyway.
I mean, it doesn't quite...
Some shops do that anyway.
Okay, I mean, it just, just a question that came to mind. Whether you're
Okay.
going to allow body work to be done, even if it's in an enclosed building, or you're just selling and servicing motorcycles. That's, or whether you're going to allow extra business in there, other than sales and service to the motorcycle, you're going to allow body work. That's a different business. It's not the same.
Okay. Our intention was to, any kind of activity like that was going to be inside, into a building, and not have any of that activity occur outside. That's where our
Okay,
intention was.
just picture this, okay? You have a new building, say, at Titus Landing. Okay, say they choose this as a location. Are you going to allow motorcycle body work? That's a different part of a business. It's not servicing motorcycles, selling new motorcycles. And that's another thing I had to ask. Are we going to sell new and used motorcycles? Is that what this is going to be? Or is it just going to be, a franchise like new motorcycles?
I'd have to defer to the applicant, Mr. Kaiser, to answer that question. I'm assuming they're probably going to be all new, but it's a retail business where the motorcycles will be sold. So whether they're new or used is, I
Okay,
can't answer
but-
that question.
I think you're missing my point. If you're going to sell motorcycles and do maintenance on them, that's one thing. If you're going to do body work, that's something else. I mean, are you saying servicing and body work are going to be the same?
I'm suggesting that body work or repair should only occur inside an enclosed building. If that's not clear in the conditions we have here, we'll certainly add some language in here to make that clear. But body work, yes, that should not occur outside. If there's going to be a body work at all, it should only occur inside the building. Am I not understanding?
I mean, I got it. What I was going to
No,
mention.
I understand what you're
Okay.
saying, but my point is, lots of times when you go into a new showroom to buy a motorcycle, okay, you'll see new motorcycles. Okay, you're selling motorcycles. That's your job. And maybe you're servicing them, minor to servicing, changing oil, and so on, fixing, whatever, minor maintenance you do on a motorcycle. But if you're talking about, you can go to an automobile dealer, they don't necessarily do body work there. That's my point. And if you're going to allow the body work, I think you should say in there, this is going to be a full service maintenance for new and used motorcycles and body repair.
We could do that.
Because they're two different, they're not the same. They're two different things.
It's a little different with the motorcycle. You run into the argument of, do you remember the automobile place over off of Chaffee? They came in and then we were to determine what they were actually doing and allowed them to remain in that area. And so they were basically saying that they were part changing. Okay, do you remember that? So motorcycles, I'm bringing this up. Motorcycles are very similar. They're not going to sit and bang out a tank. They're going to literally replace it, and they're going to most likely use that argument that we're not a body shop. We're just going to replace the parts, and that's just kind of how motorcycle shops, a lot of them work. It might be good to put in there that no building, but then again, you run into there's customization in Harleys. They're going to be piecing bikes together no matter what. There is going to be old, there's going to be new. People are going to be trading in their motorcycles, and they're going to be selling the trade-ins as well as the new ones. That's just what they do.
So that's going to be the way this would be set up. In other words, it would be retail sales, motorcycles,
That's correct.
and servicing and repair.
They could certainly have servicing and repair as part of that business, yes.
Okay.
That's what the language is.
Yeah, so if
allowing.
they did that, we'll just have to make sure it's enclosed, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm a little confused. Are we just continuing, or is the applicant coming out?
I'm going to close it, or I'm going to open it up to the public and let them speak. So we'll open this to the public and have the applicants come up.
Doug Kaiser?
Mr. Kaiser?
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Doug Kaiser with Excel Project Management. We're the developer of the Titus Titus Landing Mall. Just to give you a little context, we have a lease with Harley-Davidson dealership, which is the same dealership that owns Space Coast Harley and Treasure Coast Harley. Those facilities are about 5 times as large as what's being proposed here. This is being considered a satellite location. And what the dealer would like to do in this location is connect with the cruise industry so that they can offer packages for bike rentals to people that go on cruises. They would also provide service for their Harley owners in the area as a more convenient location, and also do sales of not only the Harley, but the accessories and clothing and all those things that you see in a Harley-Davidson store. So it's a upscale retail environment. We think it's a good fit for Titus Landing. We believe it will help bring more tourism to the core of Titusville, which was part of the whole idea of Titus Landing. And that's the context behind how this came about. When we approached staff with it, we couldn't really find anything in the code that allowed for motorcycle sales really anywhere. And that's when we kind of started down this road of how do we figure out how to make sure that we're doing the right thing here. And we have an approved use that's permitted by the city. So, any questions?
Sounds good.
All right. I see none. Thank you.
All right.
One more card.
Rodney Honeycutt.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue. I didn't have much to add except on the record that we agree to the ordinance as staff has written, and to limit the activities within the hours of operations. So, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
No? Thank you. Mr. Kaiser?
Brad has mentioned that, we had a discussion about item G, which was the goods would be brought indoors. It's not really an issue for us.
Okay.
I just expressed to him that, an automobile dealership doesn't need to bring their automobiles indoors, so it didn't make sense to me that a motorcycle dealer would have to bring their motorcycles indoors. And they plan to do that anyway, so it's not really an issue, but that was just the nature of that discussion. So I wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. All right, so we'll close this to the public, bring it back for the board. My take on it is, I think it is a win for Titusville. It's a win for Harley-Davidson owners in the area. My personal take is, whether there's a motion or not, but it's basically, I'm putting this out to you, is that I think you should expand it to include other recreational vehicles, maybe somehow tailor so you don't have to come back and rechange it. And at the same time, like I said, I don't like tailoring zoning and code specifically for one applicant. To me, that makes no sense. So you got to consider the what ifs 10, 20 years from now. If it isn't successful, it gives it the ability for another applicant to come in here and use a very similar use, something very similar, but different. And that's my take. I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm just putting that out there because it could be an issue.
If I may, I just want to point out that what Mr. Kaiser mentioned about the motorcycle sales not permitted anywhere else in the city. Automobile sales is allowed as a dealership. You can have dealerships in the community commercial zoning district or regional commercial RC zoning districts. We would even allow motorcycle dealerships there as well.
What we're just saying here is that now we're just allowing automobile sales and vehicle sales inside this particular zoning district, which currently is not permitted,
Yes.
but specifically limited just to this motorcycle use. So we can certainly bring your recommendation to widen that out a little bit more with, to allow certain other types of vehicles, such as recreational vehicles. But I'm just, we got to be real careful about what that is. Because if it's not, if the language is not very tight, then it just opens it up for interpretation.
Agreed.
Unless the board wants to see full-blown automobile vehicle sales in the UV zoning district. Okay.
I'm confused as why are we trying to separate two types of motor vehicles from each other, like a car, a motor vehicle, motorcycle is a motor vehicle. Why are we trying to say this motor vehicle can only be sold in this area and this motor vehicle can only be sold in that area? What? I just don't understand what the reasoning behind that is.
Well, I think if you have to consider what you want to see, how do you want to see Titus Landing? Because there's a controlling zoning district on that property right now that tells us what uses are allowed. And so if you want to see more auto-oriented type uses there, that's something you could recommend to City Council. We've already done that with a change with allowing gas pumps and gasoline stations there. And so then we're asking, what you're being asked to do now is allow a limited amount or limited type of automobile sales on this property. So
in Titus Landing, you think somebody would want to sell new cars? There's not enough room in there for to put, new cars in a lot. I mean, in a section in Titus Landing. Now, right now, they couldn't do it. I don't think, unless you want to sell 2 cars at a time or something.
I'm sure if it was allowed, I'm sure there'd be some way to configure it into the property.
You think so?
Aren't you saying that the districts that allow auto sales also allow motorcycle sales?
Yes.
You're just limiting the motorcycle sales to the UV property.
Correct.
For Titus Landing.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so what is the board's desire? We have a motion on this? Further discussion?
I make a motion to approve, where do we have the name of this? I'm not looking at it.
Ordinance 15-2017.
We can see it. Do you see it?
Is it?
The motorcycle sales in urban village zoning?
That's it.
Is that what you're looking at?
Nope, that's wrong. Didn't it?
On page 26, the ordinance title,
Yeah, the ordinance title.
ordinance number 15-2017 is good.
Ordinance
There it
number
is there.
15-2017. I make a motion to approve that.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call on this?
Member Ritchie?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shavir?
Yes.
Member Baker?
No.
Secretary Chambers?
Yes.
Chairman Williams?
Yes, motion passes. Member Baker, would you vote?
Basically, the reason I said no is, to me, I think this is a great business. I just don't think Titus Landing is the right place for it, because to me, it just seems to cheapen that project. I think it would be a fabulous business to have elsewhere, and would love to have it elsewhere. It's just simply, to me, that's it. And also, on page 33, item G, before this is sent to council, there's just a grammar issue. Shall limit outdoor motorcycle sales to only during. Just doesn't sound real good.
Replace the word during or remove it?
Do something with those two
Okay.
together just don't need to be there.
So I didn't mention this before, but I thought it was very good of staff to put in there about the the No Training School. I know that they do that in Palm Bay. And I think whenever you do these training schools, I mean, it is very lucrative probably because it's mandatory for motorcycle riders to have that training. It does take up a lot of room and parking lot, and I think it could cause conflict. So I'm glad that you had the foresight to acknowledge that in advance, you know. But I thought that was a good input that I wanted to just mention. Okay, so with that, that's our final item. Let's go to reports. Motion passes. It goes before council next Tuesday. Okay. City Attorney.
Okay.
I have no report, but I know Brad does.
Okay.
The only thing I want to bring up to you is that there are going to be some conflicts with meetings in August and September, and there was a list of these dates left on your dais there. So your meeting on August 16th, there is a conflict due to a city council workshop. So we want to ask you if the dates of Tuesday, the 3rd, or Thursday, August 15th or August 17th, would be acceptable to you to reschedule your regular meeting. And then on September 6th, there's also another conflict due to a workshop by City Council. And so we want to ask if the dates of the 5th or the 7th of September would work for you.
The only issue that I would have is, for me, it might be August 15th. I think I have another meeting on that day.
I don't have it scheduled.
Like,
So can we call you? I don't have my calendar with me either, so.
It says by the August 7th,
So this
or
will be instead of the 15th
meeting.
or the 17th?
yeah, they want to do it on either one of those days. The regular meeting is on 8/16, so we need
Okay,
to
like
decide what
8/16.
works better,
Okay, I got you.
15th or
I
17th.
got you.
And we would-
15th doesn't work well for me, but I don't care.
We just need your input by August 2nd, by your August 2nd meeting.
Whatever day you choose is fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, was that it? Anything else? So you used to give us reports of, I haven't seen that. You used to give us like city council updates. Can we continue to get those?
You mean the summary?
Summaries, yeah.
Summary of action? Sure, I'll have Lori start including that.
Okay.
They used to get the summary of action council meeting.
Oh, the summary of, okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we
supposed
can certainly
to-
forward that over to you.
I mean,
Yeah.
see, if I would have had a summary of action in 2013, I would have known that chickens didn't pass. But, or I could have been more proactive and just went to council or watched council myself, so. But, okay. Was that it? Anything else?
That's all I have, thank
Okay,
you.
we'll go to the school board.
Okay, I have two things to report on, but I'm only going to do one. Mr. Lindman sent me the student accommodation plan, which you can see is pretty big. So I'll try to summarize it. He's on leave right now, and tell you what's in it. There's a lot of information in there. And he actually compiled it for the school board. The second thing came from one of his staff members. Since he's traveling, Susan Hahn sent this, and it gives us an update on the schools in Titusville that are being renovated and sidewalk that's being built. So I'll let you know those items right now. Apollo, Pinewood, and Jackson are all under construction, full-scale faculty facility renewals, and that's part of the surtax that provided for that, which I reported on several weeks ago. Jackson is getting a whole new roof, and they badly need it, and so that's going to be considerable. And they're also getting AC in the gymnasium. And those of us who go to Jackson know that it's not AC right now. So that was passed. It's not part of the surtax. It's capital funding that's providing that. South Lake is reopening in August 2018. Planning has been started for that reopening, and a design builder has been chosen. Surtax project is another one, is Coquina, which is an elementary school planned for summer 2018, and the design has already started. All schools are under contract for security, focusing on single point of access and on perimeter fencing and the front office modifications. That's definitely happening at Jackson as well. The school board has approved extra funding for the front entry lockdown capability at all of the schools. So I think that's prevention. Security will be finished by the end of spring break 2018. And then the last item is that Brevard Public Schools did a sidewalk project with Brevard County at Imperial Estates. And I noticed it because I come down, what's Sisson? Yeah, Sisson. And I can see the sidewalk on the right-hand side. And so Imperial Estates, the Brevard Public Schools funded part of the sidewalk, and the county did the other part. So they now have sidewalks for kids to walk in an area that there was no sidewalk. And that's also helpful for the people who live in that area. So those are 7 different renewal areas that they are working on right now. And Apollo and Pinewood and Jackson are substantial improvements. So most of them will be finished at the end of this year, but several of them will be finished at 2018. Okay? So I think that's good news for us.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's basically it this time. Next time, you'll try to summarize the large student accommodation plan. There's lots of information in there. I got that last night in the mail. So it'll take me a little bit of time to break it down and just tell you what's relevant for us.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's it.
Vice Chairman Shabir.
No report.
Secretary Chambers.
Nothing here.
Member Baker.
No report.
Member Ritchie.
No?
I have nothing, so thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.